All right, everybody. Welcome to Workshop Wednesday. I think you all know me, Brenda Slayton with Consumers Title. Really glad that you all are here today. Um, we're going to be talking to Greg about how to gain clients using 1031 tax deferred exchange. But before we really get into that, I just wanted to mention a couple quick things. I've had a lot of agents recently ask me about a seller's net sheet program and buyer's estimate program. And I know I've told most of you, I think, but this is just a good reminder because sometimes, especially as agents, right, there's so many bells and whistles, we kind of forget where things are. So we have a really great program. It's called Title Capture. And after once Greg starts, I'll put the link in the chat. Um, but it is a fantastic, really easy to use NetSheet program. It allows you to put in some default costs so you don't have to keep putting in those, commissions and property tax percentages and stuff like that. And you can actually email your client direct from the platform. But what I like about it is that it's just a great, when you cannot get something from your escrow officer, like something like specific and detailed. It's really great if you're at an open house and you just want to play some numbers with your clients, or you're at a listing presentation and you want to show them the outcome, the financial outcome of selling their house. It's just a fantastic tool. So get signed up for that. Again, of course it's free. And if you have any questions once you get on, let me know, but it is pretty self-explanatory. So I just wanted to mention that really quick. And then secondly, we're not really going to have time today to go over the farming aspect of this workshop, but on Monday at 10:30, I'm just going to do a really quick, probably 20 minutes. It won't take too long at all. And I'll show you guys exactly how to farm investors and investment properties through Title Pro 247. So if you are interested in joining me on Monday at 10:30, let me know. And again, it'll be super fast, quick. I'll get you signed up ahead of time if you're not signed up already. And that'll be it. So just let me know about that. All right, so let's get started. I just wanted to read a little bit about Greg. Greg Burns with IPX 1031 is a senior VP with this company and has assisted thousands of clients and tax advisors by providing proven and cutting edge 1031 exchange solutions. With over 20 years of experience, Greg is an expert in the 1031 exchange rules and regulations of delayed, simultaneous, reverse, and improvement exchanges, and provides nationwide services to his clients through the National IPX 1031 network. So, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I really, really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I certainly appreciate it. Always interesting when you hear someone reading about you. You're like, okay, like wrap it up. Um, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. And so IPX is a qualified intermediary and accommodator. We facilitate exchange transactions. We have 16 offices across the country. We do about, it depends on the month, but we do about 2,000 to 2,500 exchanges per month nationally. Um, this month, I think my office is going to do a little more than 300. Of those 300, I'll do about 180 of them. And so there are a lot of people exchanging. In fact, one thing that Brenda kind of mentioned was about farming. And I always tell clients that if they made a 1031 like a rollover provision tomorrow and you didn't need to use an exchange company, and I would go into real estate and I would immediately market to investors, because investors don't really get the same kind of marketing that your homeowner does, your primary residence person does. And I don't know why that is, but for the first 10 or 15 years of my career, when I would do seminars at the board, I would always ask the question of like, how many of you guys do some kind of farming to, owner users? And like everybody raised their hand. And then I would say, well, how many of you guys do any kind of, targeted farming towards investors? And like very few people would raise their hand, a very small percentage. And the reality of it is, in all of your markets, probably 25 to 30% of your market is investment property. And so, the thing that I would look for in my farming areas, or the areas that I wanted to look at, is I would look for investors that own properties in your markets that no longer live in California, or live far away. And the reason is because, you know, uh, you know, landlord rules and tenant rules in California are just becoming tougher and tougher. And so, if somebody lives in Arizona, or, somewhere else, or Idaho or somewhere else like that, you can always say, like, hey, I see you own this property in California. Is it challenging for you to manage this property in California? 3 months ago, I was opening an exchange for a client that lived in Texas, and they were selling a property in Anaheim Hills. And that agent did the exact thing that I was telling you. They reached out to that client that lived in Texas, and they said, "Hey, is it challenging for you to manage this property in California from Texas?" And she said, "Yes. Every time there's any kind of major issue with the house, my husband and I board a plane, fly back to California to go check it out, and to make a decision on how we're going to, do the repair." And so for clients that live, out of the area, I think it's a great way to target them. Brenda obviously is going to have a class, and talk about how to do farming and how to find those individuals. But we'll just dive into kind of 1031, and talk about what you can do with it, and kind of go from there. So you guys are welcome to ask questions in the chat, or you can kind of put your hand up, and we'll, and unmute yourself, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I mean, we're here to make sure that you guys, have the best experience that you can and get the answers that you need. So 1031, the reason it's called 1031 is because actually it's section 1031 of the tax code. And so there's a lot of a lot of different tax codes. I had a lawyer that I just literally got off the phone with about 15 minutes before the call, and he said, why do you know so much about this tax code? And I said, well, because it's the only tax code that I need to know about, really. So other than section 121, which I do know a little bit about, which is your primary residence code, I don't really need to know about any other codes, because it's the only code that I really kind of, deal with. So the idea behind 1031, it allows investors, or business use owners, to sell a property and exchange it for another property that they intend to hold for investment or business use, with the ultimate goal of deferring the payment of capital gains taxes from the sale of that property into the new property. So, it's a way that investors can move between investments and not have to pay capital gains taxes every time they sell a property. Something that comes up a lot, in fact, on that same call with that attorney earlier, just a few minutes ago, he said, "Oh, well, I know if I end up having to pay capital gains tax, it's going to be like 15%." And I'm like, well, there's other taxes associated with it as well. And the federal tax goes up after 500,000, it goes up to 20%. And you've got state taxes, which are 13.3%. Your gain exceeds 250,000, so you're going to get healthcare taxes, which is another 3.8%. And then if you've taken any depreciation, you have recapture depreciation tax. And so I think people don't sometimes realize what kind of tax liability they have from selling investment real estate. And so, a client will call me and say, "Hey, like, I own this property for 20 years. I've taken, this much depreciation. This is my gain. What do you think I'm going to pay in taxes?" I don't typically want to get into those specifics, and you guys shouldn't either. I was just talking to some agents this morning that were kind of talking about that, and I said, "Listen, that's something that they should discuss with their tax advisor." What I tell clients is this, and I'm certainly qualified to figure it out. What I tell them is, at a minimum, on California real estate, you are going to pay 24.3%. That's the lowest that you can pay, right? So that's 15% federal, 9.3% state. But depending on how much depreciation you've taken, depending on how big your gain is, depending on what your income level is, that percentage should go up. And most of my clients end up paying somewhere in the 30s. And I think that if you give someone an answer like that, you've given them a answer, which is okay. The answer in this case should certainly come from their account. So the idea is, hey, I don't want to pay these capital gains taxes and I want to use the money to go buy more investment real estate. So, I'm going to go ahead and do a 1031. Question that comes up a lot is, what can I exchange into? Like I talked to a client 2 days ago that was selling an industrial deal and they wanted to buy residential. And they said, oh, my accountant said that's not like kind. And I'm like, it absolutely is like kind. So the like kind rules for real estate are very broad. They just say, are you selling real estate? Did you hold it for investment or business use? Are you buying real estate? And is that real estate investment or business use? That's the only thing that makes it like kind. So the asset class of the real estate does not matter, right? So I can sell an industrial deal, I can buy a residential deal, I can buy multiple residential properties. Doesn't make a difference. So as long as it's real estate, as long as I hold it for investment or business use, it'll qualify. Now, one of the things that we see clients starting to do, we see a couple things, right? So, the baby boomer generation, they're getting tired of the terrible teas of real estate, right? The tenants, the toilets, the taxes, the termites, all the fun things that are associated with managing property. And they are looking for passive investments. And so I talked to a client this morning named Dimitri. They're selling off a property for his parents, and his parents want to be passive investors. They no longer want to manage real estate anymore. He doesn't want to manage the real estate either. So they're exchanging into this thing called a Delaware Statutory Trust. And these DST companies, there's these real estate companies, these sponsors that go out and they buy large portfolios of properties. Like one of the deals right now that's for sale, I think, is student housing down at USC. So this company called Inland, they bought a large student housing facility that just got completed right across the street from USC, and they are selling small fractional interest in that property. And so that client that's selling this deal, they can buy a portion of that property. And I think that deal is paying 6% cash on cash. So they get a check for 6% every month. And they're just kind of a passive investor. And they hold those assets from 5 to 7 years and they ultimately sell them. And then they can decide to go into another DST or they can cash out or they can go buy their own real estate. But it is become an interesting form of passive real estate ownership. And I think you may find that clients that have owned properties for 30, years, 40 years that are getting to the retirement age, and you ask them, hey, would you ever consider selling this and doing an exchange? What that you may find them saying is, well, what is a benefit as an exchange going to do me? I'm just going to sell this property, have to go buy another property, and I'm just going to have to manage it again. They may just not want to manage real estate anymore, right? And so there also is another, type of a deal like that called a triple net lease, where you guys see them all over the place, right? Starbucks, Jack in the Box, Carl's Jr., McDonald's, Walgreens, Walmart, CVS. None of those stores are owned by those companies. They're all owned by real estate investors, right? So Starbucks is in the coffee business. Actually, I found out they're really in the sugar business because coffee has quite a bit of sugar in it. But they don't want to own their real estate. They don't want to invest the money in real estate. They want to invest their money in building new stores, right? And so, but they want to act like the true owner of that property. And so they sign something called a triple net lease, which makes them responsible for the maintenance of the property. They keep insurance on it. They also pay the property taxes on the property. So the investor that owns that property, Starbucks sends them a check every month for their rent. If the that landlord or owner has a mortgage, they would pay that, and then the balance of it they just keep. They don't have any management responsibilities. They don't have any maintenance issues, so it's net income to them. That's why they call it triple net. It's because it's net of all expenses, and that has become a very popular form of ownership for clients that want to be passive owners, right? And so that's something to consider as well. The other thing we're seeing a fair amount of right now, and I just talked to a client about this morning. This client is selling off a property in Moreno Valley. They are 1031 exchanging it into a condo in Irvine that their daughter, no, their son, I apologize, their son is going to be their tenant. So you can do that, right? The son has got to pay fair market rent for that property. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly what the property is going to rent for, but if it's supposed to rent for, you know, $4,000 a month, they can't pay you, 500 bucks a month. It's got to be a reasonable amount of rent. So we are seeing clients that are doing that. Another thing that's a big and kind of popular thing right now is we see clients that are exchanging into properties that ultimately we think is going to be their retirement home. So they sell off an investment property, they do a 1031 exchange, they take those funds and go buy I don't know, a property in La Quinta, California, and they rent that property out. There's a revenue procedure out there, and it basically gives a safe harbor for any property that's been held as an investment for 2 years. So they do a 1031 exchange, they go, buy a property in La Quinta, they rent it out for 2 years, and then after that, they can kind of do whatever they want with it. So they can convert it to a primary residence. They can convert it to a, second home. They can still make it a vacation investment property. And so there's a lot of people that are doing that, that are, exchanging into properties that they ultimately want to retire in. So there's lots of things that are not kind of non-traditional things that you can do with a 1031. Obviously, there are people that are exchanging, they're trying to create wealth where they're, hey, so I'm selling my duplex. I want to go buy 4 or 5 units. There are clients that are trying to build their portfolio. There are clients that do it for geographic reasons. So there are lots of different reasons why, 1031s happen. So I think we've got a question in the chat, which is, how long do they have to identify 1031 exchange after the initial property? So in a normal 1031, you have 45 days to identify the property that you would like to buy. Now, right now, there is a disaster relief extension that is issued for any LA County residents. So anybody that lives in LA County can extend any tax time sensitive deadline to October 15th. So if I close on my 1031 today, I have to October 15th to both identify and close. So that's an interesting thing that's going on right now for clients that are LA County residents, or if their primary place of business is in LA County, that also would qualify them for that extension. So that's something to kind of to keep in mind. So if you have clients that are LA County residents, pretty good time to sell. In fact, I did a seminar 2 weeks ago. There was about 200 real estate investors that were in a room, and I mentioned it, and you could hear the buzz in the room about people thinking about then, taking advantage of it. For sure, the hardest part of an exchange is that 45 days, to identify a property. And I would say, it's probably one of the objections you guys are going to have to overcome sometimes. So you may be talking to somebody about listing their investment property, and they may say, hey, you know what? I'd love to list it. I'd love to do a 1031, but I'm concerned I'm not going to find something in the 45 days that I have, which is certainly a valid concern. While we are starting to see, I think, in a lot of markets, inventory levels starting to rise, it's still always tough to find the property that you want to buy. So the way that I typically counter that, is I tell clients, listen, you do have 45 days. You are correct, in a typical exchange, if there's no disaster relief going on, to identify property, right? But you really start the process before your sale closes, right? So, you're in escrow, you guys have built into your contracts like a 17-day financing and inspection contingency. So 17 days before the sale closes, you guys can aggressively be out there making offers. I round that number to 20 days because by the time you make the offer, they counter, you'll probably be in that 17-day period anyway. So I tell them you can add 20 days onto the 45 days you already have. So it's really more like 65 days. And if the client says, well, 65 days is better, but still doesn't seem like it may be enough time, is there any way that I can buy some additional time? One thing that you can do is you can try to build some extensions into their sale. So let's say somebody makes you an offer on the property that they're selling. Let's just say it's a 30-day escrow, and you can counter that with whatever terms you want to counter with. And you can add to that like one 15-day extension. So say we're going to accept your offer. We're going to counter that with 30-day escrow, but the seller wants the right to extend escrow one time for 15 days. So if we get to the close of escrow, you haven't found the property that you want to buy, guess what? Seller has a right to exercise that option, buy themselves another 15 days. Well, if you add that 15 days onto the 65 days we already have, right? So we have the 45 days plus the 20 days before escrow closes. You add the other 15 days on top of that. Well, now that's like 80 days to find a property. And so, 80 days feels like 90 days, 3 months. Typically, clients start to feel better about that. When clients call me and they say, hey, you know what? Um, what advice can you give me about doing a 1031? The advice I always give them is this. One, why are you selling your asset? And what are you trying to accomplish? And once we figure that part of it out, right, then we tell them, okay, you got to make sure it's an executable goal. And then we have to be aggressive early in the transaction. So you want to make sure that that you're aggressive pursuing properties, getting something under contract, getting it into escrow, getting your due diligence done as early in the exchange as you possibly can, so you're not bumping up against that 45 days. I always tell clients getting money in and out of our hands is the best thing that you can do, not because it's not safe. It certainly is safe. But it's not really making money with us. Yeah, it's earning some interest from the bank, but it's really not out there actively making money. So, I tell clients the best thing that you can do is, be aggressive early. So, let's see. What if you identify the new property and something goes south? So, if you once you are at your 45 days, you can identify up to three properties, right? And so you identify three properties. Once you're on day 46, you are married to those three properties. You cannot re-identify, right? So that's why it's important to be aggressive early, get your due diligence done. So I'll tell you guys a real quick story about myself. I was in my own exchange. I was 5 days into my 45 days, so I'd closed. I was 5 days into my exchange. I opened up a contract on an industrial deal. My best friend's a lender. He said, hey, you got to make sure that you get an environmental report on that property. And I said, well, I don't really need one. They're carrying back financing. He said, but at some point, you're probably going to need to get a loan. And so you need to make sure that there's no environmental issues on there. So I did a phase one environmental report, which took 30 days. So 35 days, right, go by. I get the phase one back. It says that you need a phase two. Well, the phase two is, much more in depth. They take core samples. They try to go get water samples. It's very expensive. It was $17,000. So I told my brokers, I said, I can't move forward with this. I only have 10 more days to identify property and I'm not going to pay $17,000. And so the seller agreed to pay the money. She said, "There's no environmental issues here. My grandfather built the property. We've owned it for the entire time. There's no environmental." So I just agreed to stay in the deal. And I said, "Hey, if it passes, I'll pay for half." They were really, really nice people. Well, phase two takes 45 days. So now I'm 80 days into my exchange. I have only identified that one property. Phase two comes back and it's got environmental issues. I can't buy it because I'm not going to eventually not going to be able to get a loan on it. So you want to make sure that you get all your due diligence done. You can't re-identify new property after the 45 days. So, can you live on the property as the owner? You cannot live on the property. So it's got to be investment property, investment or business use. Now there are hybrids of that, right? So I have a client that's selling a condo in Ventura for like $600,000, and they are 1031 exchanging into a primary residence. But on that primary residence, there is the house is sectioned off, kind of like a duplex, and they're going to rent out a portion of the property and hold it as an investment. So there are situations where you can kind of do that. There are situations also where, I got a client that's selling off a ranch. Obviously, their primary residence on the ranch is Section 121. It's not an investment property, but the balance of the ranch is, they do horse rentals and all kinds of other stuff where it's a business. That part of it can be 1031. So, there are different variations of whether they can be exchanged or not exchanged, and kind of based on basically, how the property is held. And those are things that you guys can call me about, right? So like if you have a question like, hey, I'm wondering if, my client can do a 1031, or I had a client that called me earlier that inherited a property 3 years ago, and how does that work? That's what I'm here for. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I know that we wanted to kind of limit this to kind of end at 11:30. We're kind of at that point now. But you guys, I'm here as a resource for you. Just like Brenda on the title side, I'm here as a 1031 resource for you. So if you guys have questions or you need anything, don't hesitate to call me. So if and I can get involved, from a consulting standpoint at any point during the transaction. You could have somebody that just says, oh, I'm thinking about selling my property in a year or two. I just got some 1031 questions. Just get me on the phone with them. I'm happy to help any way I can.
Thank you so
Brenda?
much, Greg. That
Yeah,
was
you bet.
awesome. I really appreciate you taking their questions and you explain things in such an easy way. I love it. I love the way you teach and talk about 1031. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you. Thank you so
You
much. And
bet.
I'm assuming obviously that's your phone number to reach you in your title there.
Yeah, and then I will also I'll send you a brochure on 1031, and I'll send you our booklet. I'll send you my V card, and then you can send that out to any of the attendees. And my suggestion would be for you guys to create a little 1031 file folder on your desktop, put all that stuff in there. If the client has questions about, exchanges, you can send them the brochure. And then you'll also have my contact info, 6 months from now when you were like, who was that great looking guy that I heard talking about 1031s? I can't remember his name. You'll be like, oh yeah, it's right here.
That would be great. If you could do that, I will make sure that everybody that's on the call today gets that.
You
And
bet.
thank you again. Just as a reminder, everyone, especially for a few of you I know that got on late, on Monday at 10:30, I will be doing just a really quick Zoom to show you guys how to access investors and potential investors and investment properties on Title Pro 247. I'll show you how to access Greg talked about it, the out of state owners, as well as just non-owner occupied, those properties in LA County and Ventura County. That also there's a new filter that allows you to see those properties that have ADUs. We can go through length of residence, how long that owners own the property, and all kinds of good stuff. So I'll just, again, it's super easy. I'll get you signed up beforehand so you're ready to go on Monday at 10:30. And yeah, we'll just show you guys how to do that and access some potential leads for you guys. So just text me or email me and let me know you want to join, and I'll send you the Zoom link. And if you cannot join on Monday, then please just let me know, and we can set up a one-on-one, either in person or to do a quick Zoom, and we'll go from there. Also, next workshop Wednesday will be Monday. Monday. I'm reading something. Wednesday, April the 30th, again at 11 a.m. And I don't know the topic as of yet, so I'll keep you guys posted on that. But if you put that on your calendar, that would be great. And did somebody comment? I think that's it for now, you guys. Oh, there's a car Zoom call on Monday at 10:30. Okay. Well, again, if you can't be on, just let me know and we can plan another date. So thanks everyone so much for coming today. I appreciate you. And thanks again, Greg. Bye, everybody.